Who is the judge?
Yeah. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm
Okay, everybody, all the debaters mute themselves except the Prime Minister. Everybody, can you mute yourself? The Prime Minister. Everybody, can you mute yourself? Ooh, 1 second. Hello? Does it work now?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah.
The Prime Minister. Everybody, can you mute yourself? Ooh, one. Okay, the judge is having some issues connecting. I think we can shift to some other room, maybe.
Sure.
Wait, let's
What
see.
room?
1 second. Let me just. She's gonna try one more time, and then if it doesn't work, we can all shift to room 101. And then if it doesn't work, we can all shift to room 101. Okay, let's try shifting to 101. Okay.
101 শিফট করব।
Okay. Mahbuba, Daniel, can you guys judge?
I'm very sleepy. I think I
Brother Mahbuba, you won't sleep until 4 a.m. anyway.
can. No, I'm trying to sleep early. I'm a teammate. I'm a now.
Brother, I think you should judge this debate.
Oh God. Are there any other judges?
Like our judge can connect for some reason.
Oh,
So
this is going to be.
Tawfiq,
হ্যাঁ
I
বল
feel better if there was someone else.
ওই যে জুমানা আসছে
Hello. Wow, you're not getting kicked out. So, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
শোনা
Okay, cool. Okay, then you can start the debate. We cool. We don't need anyone else.
আচ্ছা ওকে আমি কথা বলতে পারবো না বেশি কারণ আমি হলো লাইব্রেরিতে সো জাস্ট লাইক I I hope you all know the format of BP so একজনের পর একজন just speak. I would like to
Also,
call
Jumanah speaking English because we have people from everywhere. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So I'm assuming that everyone knows the format of BP. So, without further ado, I'd like to call the Prime Minister to open his or her speech. You're here.
Okay, two notes before you start. Firstly, please time yourselves. Secondly, if you want to ask POIs, use the text channel room 101 to ask a POI there, okay? Or alternatively, the speaker can ask for a POI. POI is our point of information because I know we have like two new debaters today. They're basically questions that you can ask the person who's giving a speech, okay? It can be like any question that you want that's related to the case. Cool? Okay. Speeches are 7 minutes each. We can start with the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, can we start? Yeah, I don't think the Prime Minister is in the call. It's Tanvir, right?
yeah
Tanvir, why aren't you in the call? Just click the room. That's it. Also, guys, we are live, so yeah. Everyone who's tuning in at this point is going like, we're having an amazing debate.
yeah
Hello, streaming people.
Could we start?
We're waiting for the Prime Minister.
waiting for debate to start for 1 hour now.
All right. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
we have 5 minutes to hear. Whoa.
Sorry. All right. Should I start? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Chair, understand the severe trauma a person has to go. He might die in the war field, just the fact that he might have to kill a Palestine kid because his commander ordered him, or he has to kill a Palestine child because he or she was carrying a weapon that might be a threat to his own life. So understanding the trauma a person has to go through, although the fact that he didn't subscribe to the whole thing as something that we initially believe is some sort of a coerced choice that no one should force someone to subscribe to. That is to say, the very idea of the coerced choice here to impose compulsory military service to a particular person is so wrong, because this comes with a lot of consequences, such as the trauma that I already stated, or the other stuffs like violence and death that probably a person who is not habituated with these things would not like to subscribe to. That is why we are raising the idea that we are proposing that this house as Israel would end compulsory military services. The only is that why this coerced choice is so problematic on 3 different argumentative layers. Firstly, why it's problematic for a person who does not want to subscribe to violence and death, and secondarily, why it's a must that why it's a problematic for his career, and lastly, I'm going to give you the idea of the how else, in what else way you can probably ensure the nationalistic mandates that probably the opposition side is going to talk about, right? How can you mitigate the whole idea of the opposition? So to start with, as I stated, that a lot of people do not want to subscribe to the idea of violence and death, and the fact that you must have blood on your hand, even if you a physical way, even if you're just a soldier who didn't kill anyone, but the fact that you are a part of a military makes you coerced to have blood on your hand. That is something that that's supposed to happen, right? So the idea that for the people who do not want to subscribe to violence and death, and understand these are the very normal people, right? These are the people who probably do not want to kill people. These are the people who just wants to live a happy life and do not want such sort of memory in his life that I killed a person, I killed a child, or I killed a harmless civilians, and the government counted as the casualty probably as something or sort of an accident or collateral damage and whatnot. But the fact that he probably does not want to have this particular memory on his head for the rest of his life makes probably do not initially subscribe to the idea of violence and death, and to force him to do so is somewhat really problematic, because a country in itself which teaches that peace is important, which teaches that if you do violence you would end up being in jail, that preaches criminal justice system and whatnot, cannot justify a person who does not want to confront to violence and death to take it as a choice to begin with. So that's our first idea, and that would be further extended by my second speaker. So secondarily, the trauma that I'm going to talk about, right? So a lot of people, a lot of people do not want like after serving in the military, faces a lot of mental trauma, right? This is something that happens to a lot of people. That is to say, people were generally not that strong at their mind, probably has to face all these things in their life, right? So the fact that he can face trauma afterwards is something that makes us believe that the government has to take the liability of whatever happens afterwards. That is to say, you are making a properly trained armed person to go through such trauma, to go through depression by making him serve to the military for such long time. This is something which is initially important, because understand the consequences other than the principal idea. Like, it's principally wrong to make him go through this trauma, but even if we consider the utilitarian idea, or even if we are going to consider the consequences, what is probably going to happen is this particular depressed person who has armed like probably armed training and whatnot can cause a lot of problems towards the society, because just because of the fact that he is going through a trauma, he's going through a mental distress which is affecting himself and coercing him to do all those crimes and whatnot. So this is something which is initially problematic as principle and as consequences. And why this is very likely to happen, as I've stated, the trauma is something that is general to a lot of people. That is to say, a lot of people might have to face trauma afterwards. It's something that might happen. The depression can easily happen to them. So lastly, the idea of career choices, right? 2 or 8 months of compulsory service is a very long time. In further consequence, you probably would have to waste all these years. Probably you could have done a lot of other productive things. That is to say, you could have gone for undergraduate degree after 18 years of like high school ends and whatnot, but you cannot do that because you are coerced to choose this. You are coerced to serve for 2 years and 8 months. So why is like 2 years and 8 months so important, 8 months so important, right? We initially see that a lot of people who wants to do business and whatnot, or have a life plan, to them 2 years and 8 months can be really important to set up their plans and to set up their educational background. So in my last is how to input the nationalistic ideas, not through the compulsory military service but through any other means. So understand, we are already letting them go through a huge level of educational biasness. That is to say, we are already teaching them the nationalistic idea through books, through textbooks and whatnot. So even after that, if someone does not want to subscribe to service, that means that you should not force him anyway. That is going to be further extended by my second speaker. That's all.
Here.
Hi, can we have the hello?
Yeah.
I'm audible.
On text.
Hello.
Yes, you are. Go on.
Mr. Speaker, we think the side proposition did not do any job in terms of recharacterizing what Israel looks like as a state and the kind of situation it currently is. Because if you look at the situation that it currently is in terms of geopolitics, in terms of the neighbors, in terms of its internal conflicts and external conflicts, and its possibility of external conflicts and internal conflicts, we think most of the case of side so far does not seem as important, right? Because the only substantive argument that we heard from Prime Minister is this idea citizens do not want to go into the military, and this is a coerced choice, and they do not want to engage in violence and that stuff and other stuff, right? There are three basic rebuttals to this. First of all, this basically entirely based on this assumption that every single person who goes into the military has to engage in these kind of violence that proposition talked about. Because but we think that's usually not the case whatsoever, right? Because it's basically the army is in such a manner is that is you contribute to the army on the basis of your expertise. For instance, you can contribute to the tank. So, for instance, you contribute to you. For instance, you contribute to other stuff. You do not necessarily, if you cannot, that is to say, if you do not have the to have to go into the front line and kill people like the proposition wants us to believe. We don't think that's the majority of case whatsoever. But secondly, understand that they have this argument on a false notion that they have to engage in military for like long years of their life and therefore damage their entire year. Right? That's not the case whatsoever, because military only lasts, the compulsiveness of military only lasts for 2 years and a couple of months. We say that means that, but even then the a huge part of which also is spent on training itself. We say, but furthermore, right, the people who choose, most people choose to be in the military after these kind of initial compulsion. That means that it's ultimately beneficial for the state, something I'm going to speak in my substantive. But thirdly, also that the importance of argument that proposes the Prime Minister is not as important as they would like us to believe, right? Because the context that we did not a very wonderful democratic state where everyone's rights should be respected. We say we're talking about a country where even other rights like right to education, right to life even, is hampered or is in danger of being seized away by external and internal forces, that you have an equal responsibility like anybody else in a country to fight off. That is that we say that is a kind of trade-off you make as a citizen. We're going to with that. I'm going to provide three things in my substantive. First of all, why it's a very difficult situation that Israel currently is in. Why not making compulsory military compulsory will increase the chances of likely conflict internally and externally, and why thirdly is principally fair to compulsify military. Right. First of all, why the kind of difficult situation we're talking about. Right. We say is an ideological difference from its neighbors in terms of it being democracy and others being dictators, right? And happened, but even then, the only biggest democracy of the Middle East, that is Iran, is also now also of Israel, right? But because secondly, we said there is a difference of religion. That is to say, Israel being a Jewish state is an ideological and religious difference of the countries that it surrounds completely from, right? We say in such a situation, Israel, since there is a history of conflict between its neighbors and Israel itself, we say self-defense should be a priority. Why is it principally just to state to prioritize self-defense over some minor rights of its individuals? We say firstly, because the very existence of your state, that is to say from intervention and from war and from likely internal conflict, depends on the fact that you compulsify the military and you have greater military strength that you previously didn't, right? But secondly, understand the very culture and national identity that you have built around in the minds of the people, that people have association with this national identity of being an Israeli, can only exist when the country exists, right? That means single other right that proposition to talk about only does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a situation where it comes with the trade-off of having to compulsify military to ward off other kind of likely threat, right? We said this means that it's not only the right of the militant itself we're talking about the right of other family members of the military as well. Other normal citizens cannot engage in these kind of compulsory military action. We said that means that their rights, the rights that they're talking about, is not preserved in their side as well, right? But even if we buy to that proposition, this idea that war will not happen, even then we see the perception that a strong military creates in the minds of its citizens, the perception that we are now safe, that we can live our lives, is something worth rooting for. We believe something worth rooting for inside opposition, right? Because we see this perception that we are safe is extremely important, not only because it creates this possibility of daily life happening in terms of normal citizens engaging in daily meaningful appreciation and daily meaningful actions with each other in the society, but secondly and more importantly, to engage and contribute the nation, to the economics of the nation, to other stuff, to the politics of the nation that you previously couldn't, right? We say this necessarily is what is important in the status quo. Why is it principally preferable that we have this thing, that we have compulsory military in the status quo? We say because the alternative is that you get poor Israeli people who don't don't have any other have any other job, don't have any other option to serve in the military, even if they don't want. We say that is a situation where the poor are sacrificing much to this identity of nation, our identity of nationalism, that all richer Israelis share benefit of without really sacrificing to an extent that the poor Israeli does. That means that even if the poor person does not really intend to be in the military, you get the benefits extracted from this person, even if that person is not really wanting to, right? The alternative here that we support opening opposition is that everybody serves in the military. Everybody has that contribution to this national identity. Everybody serves equally to the collective benefit and collective identity of the state, which is that is a preferable state in of. Why is it so much harmful for Israel to ban this thing, right? Because we say Hamas, we've seen increasingly militant protests and attacks from groups from militant groups like Hamas, and we have increasingly divisive rhetorics of Palestinian politicians and politicians of right-winger politics all across the board, right? We have increasing motivation for different military. We have, if there is low military strength of Israel, then we have increasing motivation for other countries in neighbor to intervene in the country that now does not have as equal military strength, right? Even if they talk about countries like United States and how the West might help Israel, we say the perception that it creates that Israel is not doing as enough to defend itself. So why should we? Is something that is, and therefore might be harmful to any kind of future aid that the West can give to us in terms of what we say. That is why we're very proud to oppose.
Can I start? Can I start?
DPM, go ahead.
First of all, we want to try to we will introduce to you allies like US, like Saudi Arabia. We have many allies. We don't need that kind of soldier. We don't need that mass level of soldier to defend their country. Because we have seen that if Israel have strong allies with US, they provide a huge amount of military equipment, huge military weapons, which are they're using for defending themselves. Why do you need to actually think of think of the military persons they are heading off? Mr. Speaker, first of all, we think that if you need to defend your country, defend your culture, you don't need to opt all the people in your country aging 80 to 25 or many years. You don't need to opt out all of these peoples to defend your country, because if you need to defend your country, you can have much more strong ally. You can have much more military equipment, which is really helpful for defending your country. You don't need to carry all the people who is not willing to do your military jobs, who is not willing to sacrifice their own will, who is not ready to sacrifice their own life in the battlefield. So what we are trying to say is that if we believe that as a country, as a state, you don't have any right to harm a personal choice of a people. So individuals, they have their own life, they have their own career, they have their own passion. We can't harm their own passion or for sake of their own defense system. The government can allow many kind of military weapons, because we have seen that now battles are not going like head to head fight, face to face fight. The battles are getting much more like the diplomacy, the allies with other countries, how they are defending themselves. because we have seen the US have many troops. US and Saudi Arabia has many troops, but they are what they are acting in the battlefield. They are acting in battlefield like in buying much more weapons from other countries and creating much more strong allies. How they are defending their own country. So what we are saying that if you need to defend your country, you don't need to collect all the people. You don't need to subscribe your all people who are not willing to do the things. Second of all, why we are thinking, why we are thinking that this kind of death and violence is much more harmful for a human life. Mr. Speaker, we have seen many kinds of soldiers are facing much more trauma in their afterlife. We have seen that the soldiers who have been uh, left out for their aging, there for their 50 or 60 years old. But after they're opting out from the military ground, they can't getting this kind of thinking, this kind of battle thinking, war battle, this kind of thing. They can't opt out from this kind of ideology. So what they are doing, that their mental trauma is still going on their life. They have to take drugs, they have to take many other pills to get rid of this kind of trauma. So we believe if there are many people who are not willing to subscribe on your military academy. You don't want to sacrifice their passions, their career, but you are forcing them to do their things. What you are doing is harming people's choice, who are not ready for violence, who are not ready for battle, who are not ready for their sacrificing their care. You are forcing them to do so. Mr. Speaker, we believe this is unjustified for a people's life to who are not justified, whether they are capable or not. You don't have that right to harm people's personal choice. We believe if your military route can't grow up like this. We believe if you give their personal choice, if you give their informed choice that you can opt out from here or there, when they will subscribe on your military academy. We believe this kind of subscribing is much more beneficial than you are doing now. Mr. Speaker, how this could be a good military system to begin with. Mr. Speaker, when you have this subscribe, you can subscribe in this kind of the system. You will have a nationalist people who is willing to give their life, who is willing to fight in your battlefield. How you can get many kind of patriots to defend your country. And we believe that we believe that in this system you can have many qualityful soldiers rather than being quantityful soldiers. We believe this kind of qualityful soldier is much more beneficial than now. Mr. Speaker, secondly, we have what we have told that this kind of we also acknowledge that they are based on many kind of post conflicts, and now they have to defend themselves. Mr. Speaker, what we have seen that they have defending their themselves by Israel have defending themselves as creating much more strong allies with US, and now they are getting help from also from UN. So what they were saying that they are getting much more benefit for creating their own allies. So if you create much more allies like US, you can defend yourself country by that. So we believe by this kind of not creating this kind of thing, we will create a much more better state than theirs. We are very proud to propose.
Just a second, guys. So, can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just check my timer. Keeper. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel understand that Israel is at a pretty strategic point in its history where it needs to protect its borders, where it needs a strong military. Why? It's because the Arab world views us as a threat. Zionism is globally hated. Iran has deployed its troops at our borders. Palestine is knocking on our doors. And when the proposition says that we don't need really a good army because, well, we have allies, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Because on our side, we believe that Israel, in its current position, needs its army more than ever. And therefore, the only way to achieve that is through this method, which we believe is the most humane and cause minimal damage, dealing with their case. What have they given us under their side? Understanding the primary argument comes with people who don't want to deal with trauma shouldn't deal with this trauma, and therefore that's sad for them, right? Understand how that's more problematic, because this is a core argument. If you break this down, their entire case falls apart. On their side, they talk to us about things like PTSDs and people who go through PTSDs and how that's bad, and about how we're forcing people who are not ready for battle. Well, that happens further under their side, because understand the people who go through into military under their side, it's because people who come from these low socioeconomic backgrounds who don't really have an alternative. Because in a region like Israel, in a region like Middle East, where things are so bad right now, a lot of people do want to escape the war. A lot of people don't want to opt in and fight for their country. That meaning that people who necessarily can't do anything else and rather unproductive are the people who end up signing up. These people who are low skilled and have got no basic skill end up being at the forefronts of fight and end up being more gruesome conflicts than others. On our side, when we have the entire society volunteering for only a short period of time, this creates a more varied sense of experience where people with their own necessary skill set opt into fields which suit their skill. Meaning that if there is a person who's comfortable doing things like operating certain machinery, we will not send him to war just because we have a surplus of people who would rather be suited to that thing. We believe that creates much more of a better world under our side, because one, these people are serving for a lesser amount of time, meaning that the likeliness of this trauma will be less, unlike their side where they have this entire career built upon it. People are posted indefinitely for the rest of their lives. And also contrary to which, we have this unique sort of people who we can say that you can go and fight, meaning the chances of PTSD are extremely less, because now we have people who are able to do that, plus they're doing it for a lesser amount of time. Then they come up to us and tell us about how we have allies in form of US and about how that makes us well suited and how that's good. Understand that Israel is not an oil-based economy, meaning that unlike the Saudis, the vested interest that America has in Israel is because of its military. It's because through Israel, America can intervene, unlike Saudi, where they have this economic relationship of selling oils. Meaning that on our side, when we do not have such a strong army, when we do not have people who necessarily want to volunteer, when we end up with a rather weak army, it disincentivizes our allies, who would rather in turn go to someone else, who would rather in turn not be funding us, not be helping us. Meaning that even if we have a lot of funding coming in from US and we do not have people utilizing it, it still puts it as a necessary disadvantage, which is extremely detrimental for the reasons mentioned above. Then they talk about how people who are patriots should come and defend. We've already told you how people who are supposedly these patriots don't necessarily make this choice because they wake up one day and they're like, oh, what I want to fight for the country, I want to sacrifice my life. These are people who have no other alternative. On their side, these people are exploited, and these people are put at war for the rest of their lives. On our side, these people have a choice and only serve for a short period of time, and therefore can choose on to do what their necessary passion allows them to do, like they say. Moving on to my arguments as to how we make the situation much better. Understand, Mr. Speaker, the main key player in this entire debate is Middle East, meaning that when we have what are significant benefits to an individual when the entire society opts into this military service, it does two major things. One, it makes sure that citizens across the country are more invested into the geopolitics going on in the region and are more invested into the international decisions that their country makes. Meaning that unlike in a country which has water relationships, where people feel that they're completely detached from the war zone, this experience that people gain from being in a region where they see certain things as being hostile, it makes them more likely to be more invested in policies and things like international relations or international policies of foreign policy. policies, making Israel a country in the Middle East whose policy has such sensitive effects, making it fall under further scrutiny, making it fall under further discussions, because people now know what are the effects of these policies and people know how that's going to play out. Unlike in a country like America, where a lot of these policies are made and a large significant of the a large portion of the population doesn't even know how that's going to affect people, doesn't even know how that's going to affect others. We believe in a country like Israel, which is situated so strategically, we believe this is extremely important. Two, military exercise empowers people in a region and therefore gives them necessary incentives to work better, meaning that people who go through this military service gain strategic skills and have a skill set in to defend themselves and have a skill set to lead their life much more better, meaning that they gain things to, they gain these certain skill sets to lead their life better. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, in times of extreme crisis, where the country needs these people to come for an emergency and defend these borders, which is really likely given we've already established the context of what a sensitive situation Israel is in right now. It makes sure that these people are ready to combat that crisis. It makes sure that these people have the necessary skill set to come to their country's aid in a situation where the country needs their help, in a situation where the country wants them to help, which makes it more better. Any POIs at this point? Seeing we have none, I'm moving on. Third, how does it benefit the military as a whole even further, or the geopolitics of a country like Israel? Understand where this country is based. This country is based in a region like the Middle East, which has a habit or which has this history of armies becoming more powerful, of dictatorships coming into formation, meaning that when you have this entire army that is based upon created of these orthodox socioeconomic people who don't really have a lot of education, and when you create a significant distance from the people who are in well-off cities, and when you create a significant distance between the people who go to the army, this creates a problem. The problem that the people are distant, and therefore that creates a difference in perspectives of how things happen and how things should be. Meaning that given the history of the region, given the things that happen in the region, it makes it more likely and more scary, the situation that these people go through. It makes it more of it makes the situation worse. So we believe that in a region like the Middle East, where people like Yazidis or people like Yemenis, who have come time and again shown that when you have weak armies, you suffer, and when you don't have proper military, you suffer. We believe we should give, as a country like Israel, the maximum possible benefit to benefit themselves, because one, it helps people on an emotional basis. Two, it is a more humane practice because we're not forcing or exploiting anyone off their economic needs. Three, more importantly, it makes people feel safer, and it makes sure that military is not just a job of few people who are forced to go there, but rather a society as a collective benefit, and it makes citizens more involved in it, along with giving them the necessary skill set. Thank you so much.
I'd like to invite the member of government, please.
Yeah, one. All right, so I'm starting. So firstly, let me start with my first argument. The opposition here comes up and says that Israel is in a very strategic moment in their history and whatnot, that they're facing a war that could change everything, blah blah. But understand this, that without the government compulsorily bringing people into the military, they can still win this war and they can still outperform their enemies with the help of their allies and etc. So, how? We tell you that there are other alternatives. Firstly, since you say that the country is in a threat, and so people are likely to go to war anyways. So, if the government encourages them or pushes them just to go to war instead of forcing them to go to war, then this is much more beneficial. Secondly, in today's era, wars are not like the previous century. Wars are more digital now. Wars are fought on by aircrafts, rockets, missiles, etc. You don't need that much of manpower. What you need mainly is a brain and some um, uh, special training in cyber attacks and digital warfare. So, if a country brings in people for just 2 or 1 years, as the opposition, as the op said, then there isn't sufficient training for these people to be sent out to war. Instead, we tell you that to recruit people like by the normal standards, and then give them sufficient training and create a but much better and much more efficient army. And thirdly, when you force people to come in to the military, you are decrease. A lot of people do not like this because their choice is being stripped away. Their freedom of choice is being stripped away. One of their basic rights. So this is clearly principally wrong, and they're forced to do something that they don't want to do. This is morally wrong as well. So what this does is decreases their morale. They feel like the government is forcing them to fight a war which they don't really want to fight. Well, obviously, there are some who do want to fight, but a lot of them don't want to fight as well. They don't want to go risking their lives and leaving their families, leaving their jobs, etc. etc. And this mentality is also quite contagious because they can hamper the entire army's morale as well. And if the other soldiers see that yes, the government is forcing them to come, the government is forcing us to come, then their morale will decrease as well, and thus creating a much less efficient army. So now to my second point, which is that reduce and that removing compulsory military service will reduce death and violence in these wars for both the sides. Now, how? Now, understand this. When Israel reduces their army size, then their enemies will also feel like they don't need as big of an army. Because if, let's say, as the US stops its arms sales, Saudi Arabia, many in Iran have said, have proposed to cut down on um, military spending and uh, army recruitment. This is because these two are rivals. So when one reduces their military spending, and then their enemy also reduces it, because they don't feel like they need to need as big of an army or as strong of an army to face them. So what this does is this means less people in battle equals less death. And as I've said before, today's wars have become more technical and not all about manpower and men running with guns into the field shooting at each other. It's become filled with digital warfare with rockets, missiles, aircrafts, etc. So this reduces the men in war, increases the technicalities, and overall reduces the death and violence in these places. And also, on the other side, if recruitment reduces, then what happens is these people can go back to their stay in their current lives and um, let's say a person is a businessman but he's forced to go to war, go to a war which he doesn't even want to go, and this POI not taken, and this hampers his performance at his job. Not only that, but this also this also speaking from the other enemy side, this also ensures more employment in other sectors because if less people are being recruited, then these people can go to other sectors and um, perform well over there. This ensures better economy and overall a better society. And and now and now I'd like to rebut something that the OO said. The OO said that the US is interested in Israel because only of the army. However, this is not the case because as the OO himself said that Israel is a very strategic point. This contradicts his earlier statement. This means that the army and the US and the Western powers aren't that much interested in the army because, as I've said before, today's wars are more technical and filled with aircraft carriers and etc. They just need a strategic base to fit their missile defense system or rocket systems and etc. And that is what they're interested in. Thus, a reduction in the size of Israel's army will not deter their interest, and their allies will stay with them and fight this war. Proud to oppose.
Check, check. Am I audible?
Yep, whenever you're ready.
Okay, wait. Just give me one sec. Okay, I'm going to start in three, two, one. All right. Closing opposition will take a different approach in this debate. We agree that the addition of military conscription will increase more power in terms of military power, but we want to argue that in this case, Israel has achieved economic miracles such as Japan, and we believe that the wars are, we agree with the government side of the house that the wars are combated with diplomacy and link and also with technology. But the problem in this status quo lies on the less integration of Israeli teenagers because of the millennials tendency and the separation of integration between those millennials and Orthodox Israelis, for example, like Orthodox Jews versus Israeli millennials. I'm going to explain that later. But OO stance is this: we believe that military conscription is not necessarily only for the strengthening the military power of IDF, aka Israeli Defensive Forces, but we believe that these teenagers should join the military conscription to have fun and bonding. Right? This is very important because we want to increase the integration of the Israelis, which are divided because of the the progression of um, millennials, right? So I'm going to deliver one extension with three layers, right? I'm going to deliver an argument regarding the benefits for Israeli teenagers to engage integration, in which that the three layers would be a rite of passage, with will increase the melting pot, in which that will integrate more people, and will also increase the notion of feminism, right? But before that, let's rebut the case of opening government, right? Look, or government case. Look, government case relies on the basis of trauma, right? We believe that if closing opposition can dispel in the case of trauma will be, you know, will be rebutted, and their case will also fall, right? Notice that in this case, trauma will of course not going to be the paramount problem, because number one, notice that IDF or the military conscription is inherently different with enlisting with the armies, right? Because they will not enlist forever. Of course, they have the the extension on which that after they enlist, they can just go out. For example, they will not be drafted into war and get killed. For example, IDF has its main forces, and which the people are already consented to fight in the war against Pakistani, for example, as compared with the teenagers that only wants to go there to learn, for example, because it is their job to do so. Notice that IDF also has strict restraint on letting individuals go to reserve, right? Moreover, Israeli has already a strong, strong partnership for other countries, and has the economic power, and already has drafted peace treaties. For example, we believe that the IDF is already impressive right now, and the threat is reduced considerably. Therefore, military conscription benefit is not necessarily only on the IDF forces, but on of course the integration of the people, right? But notice also that the books is not necessarily enough to create strong bonding to people, right? I'm going to explain that later in my argument. Okay, let's jump to what my argument about number one. It will create a good integration. Notice that in this case, military conscription will create, military conscription in status quo is the means of rite of passage from these teenagers, for example, because the culture says that it's it's like culture-based adulthood, right? If it is very equivalent to going to university, for example. Notice that man and woman is also drafted in here, right? In this case, if you go to military conscription, you also will going to, step up to the ladder of society. People will respect you even more because you already, join the culture on which that you are trusted within the bond of society, right? Moreover, this also instilled the proudness of a country, right? Of course, there is a sense of nationalism, like I already talked about. But in this sense, we believe that is going to benefit the teenagers even more, because the family support is pretty high in this case, right? Because if, for example, if you are from the different backgrounds, it will increase you will reduce the age poor gaps within the society, because most people will eventually enlist anywhere, right? Even if you're rich, even if you're poor, we will join in that sense, right? But moreover, CGs talk about military conscription will no you will not learn about the cyber warfare, for example. Notice, like in this case, military conscription also increased because of the technology already increased to begin with. The military are increasing more technologically developed because of the Israeli economic miracle, right? We notice that military conscription will also learn about cyber warfare in this case. uh, you know but without military conscription, we notice that this teenager will not even care about the protection of the country, because they believe that their financial capability of Israel will protect them from the wars, right? The parallel example would be like Japan GSDF, for example. People just do not care because Japan is already strong financially. Well, there is another impending proxy wars, for example. We believe that we should heighten the protection, the understanding of this, teenagers, in order for them to protect their own country. But secondly, military conscription actually, give the teenagers a place to mingle. For example, notice that military conscription in Israel is different with military conscription in other places. For example, first of all, it's informal. That is not necessary. You not necessarily need to salute with your officers. For example, your officers eat and sleep with you, for example, and they talk to you with their problems. For instances, there is a sense of discipline and forces, for example, but most of them, mingle with each other. Notice also that there are different types of people that is being drafted. There are Orthodox Jews, for example. There are also native Israel and also millennials, for example. This will be a place for them to bond, because number one, they will be together for like 2 years, for example. They will be sleeping in the same bunk bed. They can talk about their problems. They're also being tasked with the different things, for example. Notice that outside military conscription, they will not bond this highly, especially with the millennial world, and which it is forcing them to be free and not bonding like this. For example, this is like a traditionalist concept of friendship, and we've forgotten that the most. And military conscription can increase the teenagers bonding with us, for example. And moreover, if the governments of the house, argue about these people will be forced, it will be trauma, for example. Notice that a lot of draft dodging is here, right? For example, if you're really religious, for example, in Torah, you can just avoid be drafted, for example. If you have low to motivation to serve, for example, you will not be drafted, for instance. This is actually very fine, right, in this case, because a lot of people that join her, meaning that they are physically able, psychologically able, and are then that want to mingle with everybody. Notice that because it is compulsory, they cannot, most of the majority disabled will not be able to dodge, for example. So in this case, most of the people will be able to join and mingle, for example, and we will benefit a lot of people, a lot of teenagers that is increasingly, far from the um, technology will create more bonding in this case. So with that in mind, I rest my case. Thank you.
I'd like to call the government whip, please.
Yeah, I'm here. Just a second. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to start off with some. Uh, I'd like to start off with some extensions that our upper house had forgotten to mention. Like, so they first of all, the opening government came up and said about unwanted soldiers in the military who doesn't want to kill each other. They don't want to see violence and they have mental trauma. Then they take drugs to get rid of those mental trauma and etc. They also said about the government making the individuals join the military forcefully, ordering for assassination. But, and they mainly talked about they having allies to help them in times of distress. But notice that when the other countries they help each other not only for the sake of helping but for their own selfish reasons, for their own selfish reasons, for their own development. Because see, for example, in the independence war of Bangladesh, India had helped Bangladesh to win the war against Pakistan, and Bangladesh at that time had the production of a certain military equipment. But as the war was won by Bangladesh, and when India left Bangladesh, they had taken all those military equipment of Bangladesh, stripping Bangladesh of their defensive power. Afterwards, the opening opposition had talked about people, the poor people, those who have no jobs. The government comes up and over here the compulsory, the fact that compulsory military activity, military service, this thing comes up, and that's why they can get a job and so on. But see this, that what they're mainly doing is nothing but exploitation. They're exploiting the poor people. They're taking benefits of those people without their knowledge, because they're saying that since they're poor, they have no job to do, they will be forced, they'll be forced to join the military service in order to have a job. But why this will result in deaths, because they this is basically their dead zone. Furthermore, the deputy leader of opposition spoke about joining military provides strategic skills to live their life better. But the thing is that not everyone is so eager to enter their dead zone, because when it is compulsory, they also showed a benefit like stronger army, so that the Israel can our military can defend better and so on. But see this, if, since you're saying that joining the military service is becoming compulsory for a situation like this, where a son and a father are both forced to join the military service, since it's compulsory. But one of them dies, they will eventually they will see the root of the problem, that since this joining the military service was compulsory, their suppose the father died, it was the cause of their father's death. So what will happen in this case? The son will go against the government, because this will rather create vengeance, and this will spread chaos. Then it's chaos, and people will rather then go against the government. Furthermore, the closing opposition said that Israel teenagers would join the army to have fun uh, and whatnot. But the thing is, but the problem in here is that the teenagers, as they mentioned, they're rational thinkers. They often take decisions without they often take decisions subconsciously uh, and rationally, without them actually thinking about what the consequences might be. So in this case, we think that they would be better off in the private job sector rather than in wars, because it would be much more beneficial if they invest their hard work in development activities rather than engaging them in war. Because if the teenagers are made compulsory to join the military service, the future generations are ruined, and they are born people the future generation will be uh, into a reign of war and whatnot. So in this case, why Israel? Because Israel being a Muslim country, uh, Israel being a Muslim country, it is so called the birth of ISIS and terrorists and whatnot. So why are they? Uh, that's why they are most of the time constantly under attack, because they want to eradicate these so-called terrorists and whatnot. So as a civilian of Israel, when the civilians know that they will die anyway from under vigorous constant attacks, the chances are high that they will stand up to defend their country rather than just sit down and watch others go off. So in this case, joining the military service should not be compulsory, because if in the end, when they see that they're under constant attack, their mind will automatically switch, that they will think that I should go and defend my country. Rather, the individual choices matter here more, because only those patriotic enough will later join the military service in order to defend themselves. Because ending military service like compulsory results in people enjoying the daily benefits, like a person like people enjoying the daily benefits, like they will be able to do their job properly, they will be able to pursue their career, something that they actually like and they want to follow, such that a development will occur, and so on. Because if it is compulsory, it affects their jobs and family. Since they're forced to join the military service, uh, which they are not contented with, they'll obviously feel out of place and they will not like it. So it will rather affect their jobs and family. So to continue with my first speaker's example, like if a businessman is forced to join the military service, it will rather result in the crashing of his or her business, which will lead to further unemployment and etc. So if joining military service was not compulsory, they could rather sit back and work their way through to develop the country. The main brains would be out there working, and they would make the infrastructure of their countries even more better, and they can so that they can stand better. Any POIs?
O or CO?
Uh, oh,
Go
any
to war.
POI?
And with the factual correction, can you hear
Oh,
me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes, yes.
When we've already established that people would not be willing to go to war in a country like Middle East, and with the factual correction that Israel is not a Muslim country, nor are people suffering through terrorism, rather people live happier lives and are very content in a pretty safe environment, why would people still opt to go to war?
Could you repeat much more clearly? I didn't get it. A bit slowly.
with the factual correction that Israel is not a Muslim country and people rather live in complete security and with a very good economy, why would people in your world still continue to go to war when you've already proven to you how that's extremely unlikely?
In this case, when I said that Israel is a Muslim country, I meant majority of the people in Israel are Muslim. So, uh, and it is a fact that people of Israel are considered like terrorists and whatnot, like the people behind all those uh, bomb blasts and etc. In other countries, which is why they are often said to be under attack by other countries because they don't want these terrorists who are uh, breaking the equity of the society. They're attacking other countries and destroying their stable society. With that, I would like to end my speech.
Last speech of the House. Opposition whip, please. Thank you.
Um, is it my turn now?
Yes, Robab, it is your turn.
Okay. Just like to clarify that I do not know what I'm doing. Okay.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay. Honorable Speaker, I'd like to begin my speech by reinforcing the fact that military conscription has greater benefits than it has its losses. It is necessary in the case that when when only a small portion of the population of any country enlists in the military, and it creates a sort of social divide between civilians and the people who have served in the military. Um, what Israel has been doing, the conscription, it breaks that barrier. It makes civilians more aware of the geopolitical issues regarding their countries. It creates hardened citizens that are not ignorant of what is going on and what consequences the decisions of their country has on other people. And it removes that social barrier between people that have served and people that have not served in the military. Understand that physical and psychological screening systems do exist in determining who is eligible for the military and to serve. And it is placed in position so that people that are best suited to serve are taken in. And as per the issue of the time and the time lost that from their lives, 2 months, 2 years and 8 months is a relatively much shorter time than most countries that have indefinite military service of 4 years and upwards of that. And the economic impacts are much less compared to that. As Israel's biggest asset is its military, and that's what Israel's allies have their greatest interest in. And strengthening that military is in Israel's best interest. The the sense of solidarity between citizens that all that military conscription creates is an important aspect. With that, I'd like to conclude my speech. I guess I don't know.
Okay, thank you everyone for this wonderful speech. Obviously, as you can hear, there's a lot of people around me. I will send the feedback in the group. Thanks. And
Hello, guys. You can unmute yourself now. And Esther, can we go off stream?
So feedback on the group means do we get to ask like